Hello and welcome back for another episode of the Noobie Dentist podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Omid Izami. In this episode, I sat down with Dr. Sunny Pahouja, who is a dentist in the United States and the man behind the Facebook group Dental Investment Group. In this episode, we spend a lot of time talking and diving into various financial topics for new grads. We talk about loan repayments, investing in assets, and when is the right time to buy a house or a practice, and much, much more. I certainly learned a lot from this chat, and I'm sure you guys will get a ton of value out of it as well. Sunny is very knowledgeable and shares a lot of very practical and important tips from his experiences with us. As a general disclaimer, the advice given on this episode is just meant for more educational purposes and to get you guys thinking about these ideas and concepts. It is not really specific to your financial needs, so just take everything with a grain of salt and do your own research and work before you decide what's best for you, and maybe consult some professionals. This episode is brought to you by my good friends at Henry Schein. With over 60,000 products available from consumables, CAD/CAM technology, lab and large equipments, and many courses that they're running, you can always rely on them to be your trusted business partner every step of the way. This is my 50th episode, and it's a very special milestone to hit. Looking back at all the amazing guests that I've had on the podcast, I feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity to talk to so many bright young stars in our profession, and I hope that you guys as the listeners are getting a ton of value out of it as well. For me, it's very special to be able to contribute something to our amazing profession, and I'm very excited about growing as a clinician and using this podcast as a means of helping you guys grow as well. So I just want to thank all you long-term listeners. Your support has helped me continue to put in the hours of work that makes this podcast possible. And if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I hope you go back and check out some of the old episodes as well, as there's been a lot of great topics that we've covered over the past 50 episodes. As always, if you have some time, I would really appreciate it if you can head over to iTunes, give the podcast a 5-star rating, and leave a review. It's really helpful in growing the podcast and helping us get more exposure out there. Without further delay, I hope you guys enjoy this jam-packed episode with Dr. Sunny Pahouja.
Hello and welcome to the Noobie Dentist podcast, the safe place for newbie dentists to connect, collaborate, learn, and grow. The Noobie Dentist podcast aims to provide high quality and high value content for all the newbie dentists out there. With your host, Dr. Omid Izami.
So I'm here with Dr. Sunny Pahouja in the United States, who's kindly given up some time on Father's Day Sunday to come and chat with us about some finances. He is the starter of Dental Investment Group, and I'm excited to kind of get him on today to talk some finances, to give a lot of value to the new grads listening to this who are kind of tossing up between student loans and like practice purchase, home purchase, investments. So Sunny, I hope you can clear some of this up for us today. How we normally start off is with just a bit of an origin story. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you kind of got into this financial world of things, and then we'll kind of take things from there.
Yeah, for sure. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, but I practice in Cincinnati now. Graduated back in 2011 from the Ohio State Dental College of Dentistry. And, I've been here for about 4.5 years. I worked as an associate for about 2.5 of that originally. And it's been a lot of fun. Practice ownership has its, ups and downs, but, I feel like mainly ups, which is always a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun.
That's great. So what made you decide to get into dentistry in the first place?
Yeah. So I was actually a business major in undergrad, and I always had this interest in healthcare, but I wasn't really sure what to do. So I came across a dentist and I came across a dental student pretty much in that same week over the summer, one of these summers. And I started talking to them, just started asking the dentist, hey, can I come shadow you? And he said, sure. I started talking to him a lot, to the dental student, just one thing after another. Started talking to actually one of my friends that was actually going through the process of applying to dental school.
Yeah.
And it just felt like a lot of those things were making sense to me. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to look into what the requirements are, what the DATs are like, and all that kind of stuff. So as soon as I was starting to finish up my business degree, I started taking some of these GECs for dental school. And next thing you know, I just spent a whole summer taking this OChem, and I'm like thinking, if I get through this and I'm going to take the DATs and I'm going to apply, see what happens. And luckily everything just worked out where, after that summer, got through the interview process and got in. So it was just one of those things that happened kind of fast, but I was so happy that I made that transition from business to healthcare. And I'm glad that I chose dentistry over other healthcare fields right now, especially with all the mess that's in healthcare. I feel like dentistry gives you the option of, being able to help a lot of patients, but at the same time, be able to really show the business side of your, creativity.
Yeah, it really is the best of both worlds in that regard, that you get to have so much time and room to kind of, express yourself in the entrepreneurial and business sense of things and be a small business owner, really, which is pretty exciting. So that must have been a pretty hard transition, like going from a business undergrad to all of a sudden like taking organic chemistry and biochemistry, trying to like switch your brain to understand all those in preparation for dental school. So when you finished up dental school, when did the financial side of things really kick off for you? Like, was that something that you started in undergrad when you're a business major, or like when did you start investing and learning more about the financial literacy type side of things?
Yeah, so I was always interested in business. I think it was my sophomore year in business school when I opened my first brokerage account. It was kind of funny because I was just, sitting there watching CNBC. And I'm like, this show is kind of cool. And I just said, okay, I got to look into some of these stocks that are being mentioned. So I started researching these stocks. And started looking into opening a brokerage account. So within a week or so after that, opened a brokerage account. This was when I was 20. I'm 35 now. And, ever since then, I've just never really had lack of interest when it comes to the stock market, investing, talking about retirement options. So it was just one of those things where I just felt like it was natural to me, not because I was a undergrad business major, but it was just one of those things that I've always been interested in trying to understand the concept of money, how it works, why it works, how to make it work for you in your retirement years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a really important point. I remember I was listening to a podcast a while back, and they had a financial advisor on, and he would come on and say, oh, doctors are notoriously like not good with money. And they had they said MD is like equivalent for like money dumb, because they don't know their stuff at all. So I think it's really cool. And that's why I'm excited to have you on today, because I want to kind of, touch on like, a few of the broader topics that a lot of people face when they graduate, and see sort of what your priority is. And that's not necessarily like, in depth into the numbers, but just like philosophy of, okay, when should we prioritize loans? When should we prioritize investments? So let me just, I guess, make up like a fixed situation and then kind of see how you would approach it. And we'll kind of dive into that from that lens. So, typical grad is, a lot of the international students here in Australia from Canada, for example, a lot of the American graduates, we're graduating with like 300 grand plus in debt. So we're coming out, we got, roughly, and in Canada, we have a line of credit that students get. So it's not like a government loan or anything like that. So it's a line of credit, and it's not like a set loan that you got to make set payments. So you can just pay minimum payments if you want. Interest rates have gone up a little bit. So it's about 5% now. So, roughly to service the loan, you're looking at like 14, 15 grand a year just to make minimum payments. So, and you come out and you get a good associateship. You're lucky, you're making 150 grand a year, let's say. How would you begin to work through your financial situation at this point? So you're making like decent money. You can, kind of make the loan disappear with 15 grand a year. So you have money to invest or buy a practice or buy a house. Yeah. How would you begin to kind of think about these things in all the moving parts?
Yeah. So, back in the day when the loans weren't as much, like you said, $300,000 to $400,000 is not out of the question at all nowadays. I felt like the focus should have been on reducing your debt as much as possible, as fast as possible, and then kind of focus on the whole retirement, savings, investing.
Yeah.
But things have changed. Things have changed, not necessarily for the worse, but it's just they've changed. They're different. So I think as long as we shift our priority on how we allocate that money, we can still reach that financial independence. We can still reach those goals that we have. It's just that how you allocate some of that money has to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And especially with $300,000 to $400,000, being able to make minimum payments actually makes a lot of sense, because what you're doing is you're still trying to pay down some of that debt, but you're also allocating some money towards investments, some money towards your savings goals, some money towards retirement planning. And the biggest concept, as we all know, the time value of money is so important. Yeah. It's such a key component to growing your wealth. So if you start investing, in your 20s and 30s versus in your 40s and 50s, that makes a huge difference. And that's where I feel like it's not as feasible to focus on just debt reduction nowadays it's more important to do a little bit of everything. So you dabble a little bit in debt reduction, you dabble a little bit in investments, savings.
So you recommend to split up the pie a little bit and just kind of put certain amounts into each thing at the same time.
Absolutely.
How about in the sense of investments? Early on in your career, and this is something I've been like struggling with as well. So say the tax year comes around and you've saved up and you have all of a sudden like 30-40 grand that you thought you have to pay tax, but you don't have to because you savings and deductions and all that. So you get a nice like lump of money after like maybe 1 year of work, and you're not sure what to do with it. And and in the past I was like, okay, maybe I'll invest this, I'll get a decent return. Nowadays, now that I'm working a little bit, I'm realizing necessarily that maybe the best ROI may be to invest clinically to improve your skills, maybe learn implants or learn ortho or something. How about that? When does that side of things of like, let's just work on maybe increasing your income first, or maybe buy a practice priority over those other things of investing?
I definitely think so. And we all talk about the ROI on stocks, ROI on savings accounts, and that's fairly small compared to what you get out of that by investing in yourself. That's such a small amount. Getting 5-10% on your money invested is one thing, but to think about investing that money in yourself and getting 500 to 1,000, 10,000% return on that money is huge. Most graduates don't have the training on how to place implants or how to do good endo or how to do even good restorative work.
Yeah.
We're basically given a piece of paper that says, hey, here's a license, practice dentistry, but it doesn't say practice good dentistry. Mm-hmm. It doesn't say you can place implants. It doesn't say you can do good oral surgery. So really have to focus on developing yourself first, investing in yourself first, because if you don't have the speed, if you don't have the clinical knowledge to work on providing patients good care, none of that stuff matters, because your income is it just becomes stagnant. It doesn't grow because you're like, hey, I know these basic skills. Yeah. And I can't really grow my income because I know how to do fillings, maybe I know how to do cleanings, all that kind of stuff. And that's basically it. But when you start investing in yourself and focusing on some of those more complicated procedures that can have a high ROI, and the fact that not everyone else is doing the same thing out there.
That's right.
So then you start to differentiate yourselves from your peers and competition, essentially, and you're able to actually make more money and serve more patients.
Yeah, so I think it's like Tarun Agrawal, who runs like the T-Bone Speaks podcast. He always says you need to kind of move on from doing like dental school dentistry if you want to really start making good money in your practice. So really invest in ortho or implants or cosmetics, and to really elevate the income potential so you can actually have more money to kind of do other things with and invest.
So true. Yeah, so true. I mean, working on single tooth dentistry can get exhausting. Yeah. And what you're essentially doing is you fix one problem, then something else arises. You fix that problem, something else comes up. But to be able to give your patients a more comprehensive treatment plan and figure out what their needs are, figure out the plan, work with your team on coming up with the financing for them. Because the truth is, most people aren't sitting around with $10,000, $15,000 in their pockets. Hey, I need all this dental treatment done and I'll get it done.
Yeah.
They need help from maybe their insurance, which is fairly minimal for the most part, but they also need help from our team that basically helps them figure out how insurance works, how finances work, how the financing part of that works. So at the end of the day, it's not just where the dentist is the only person that's making the difference. It's the whole team that's making a big difference. And communication is so big. Yeah. When you help patients understand what they need, why they need, they're more likely to say yes to their oral health. That's great. So in terms of the investment side of things, what do you recommend as like a pathway for, obviously some people just, could care less and they just want to find someone like a brokerage company or a financial advisor that can just take it for them, and they just want to be passive investors and just put the money in, and that's fine for them. They're happy. If someone wants to be a little bit more active, they want to buy their own, they want to manage their own portfolio, how do you recommend people learn about these things to be confident to do that? Absolutely. So, I think there are so many articles out there that talk about the basics of investing. The more you read, the better you're at. I mean, once you have the clear foundation of why you should be investing early on, why you should take some of those steps to do things now. Yeah. Budgeting is such a key component of all of that. And I always say, pay yourself first. And when you talk about if expenses category of your budgeting. You have expenses for your mortgage, you have expenses for your food, car payments, insurance, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What if you created another category for investments and you treat that investment category as an expense, and you basically tell yourself that I've got to put away this much per month in this category because it's an expense, I don't have a choice. Then you work your way down and you force yourself to spend the rest of the money on all those other things that we just talked about. So from the standpoint of trying to figure out how to learn some of that stuff, a lot of times I think initially when we're starting off, it makes a lot of sense to keep things as simple as possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to get into alternative investments unless we have, so much more excess cash that we can take bigger risks.
Mm-hmm.
But initially, index funds provide a great deal of liquidity. They provide a great deal of diversification, and they really kind of, let you ride the market, whether it's going up, whether it's going down, and taking advantage of dollar cost averaging. So you take a little bit of money each month and you're putting it into some kind of index fund that you researched, you made sure that it's going to work for you. And I think for younger adults, a lot of times we talk about, balancing. For me, I feel like, if you're under the age of 40, 45, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to balance things into bonds. Mm-hmm. Just because, the return on that is so minimal.
Yeah.
And we're young. We have, there's a lot of time that we can spend on the investing career. So if you're under the age of 45, you can basically allocate most of your money in the stock market from the stock standpoint, equities, and then balancing it out in different kind of fund categories, whether it's large cap or small cap, mid cap, and international funds. Some of that, even just finding the allocation, there's some good examples online that go over some of that stuff.
Yeah. So with the cost dollar averaging, if you're say every month at the end of it, you pay yourself like $2,000, I'm going to put this $2,000 in.
Yeah.
So you're buying the same like index fund or ETF, you're just putting more of it, or you're buying different types every time?
Yeah, pretty much the same. So once you have decided that, okay, I'm going to be allocating, 25% of my money in large caps, 25% in mid caps, 25% in small caps, mm-hmm. and maybe 25% international. Whatever that percentage breakdown is, you basically do the same thing every month. Now, I do believe in the fact that we should take advantage of some of those big sell-offs. So kind of like the one that we had in December, and I got a lot of messages from people that they took advantage of some of that sell-off back in December. So you do keep some extra cash on hand, and when events like that happen, you're able to accelerate that investing.
Okay, so
which is kind of nice, because now you're able to really buy low mm-hmm. on some of those funds that you've been investing in. But you say, hey, look, I had another $10,000 sitting around. I'm going to go ahead and put this money in the market now. And you don't necessarily know if that's the right time, but you know that, over the last, let's say 6 to 8 weeks, the market had gone down 8 to 10%. It seems like maybe the sell-off is overly done. So you're taking a chance, but you're taking a calculated risk. You're not just blindly putting money in. You're taking a calculated risk at that point.
And what's your opinion on individual stocks? Is that something that shouldn't be touched for the newbie investor, or?
Yeah, so I personally do some individual stocks, and I enjoy it, but I do research the heck out of them.
Yeah.
I basically keep a list of less than 50 stocks that I'm looking at, and really research the heck out of them. If it makes sense to buy them or not. But generally speaking, I don't necessarily say that that's the right move for a lot of people, because one, it takes time to research. One, it takes time to really make sure what you're buying is going to pay off. Just think about it this way. Out of those 50 stocks, you decide, okay, I'm going to put that money in 2 of them. Yeah. And both of them end up having bad earnings, and they tank. And this is happening now. Look at some of these stocks that are barely missing, and they're tanking 15, 20% just like that. So in an essence, I don't think that's a good risk strategy. Yeah. But if you know that you've done your due diligence, if you know that the company has good long-term prospects, not trading it for the sake of, trying to make 10, 15% in a short term and then selling it. But individual stocks do make sense if you know that long-term that this company has a good balance sheet, it has good prospects, they have good pipeline for their future revenues. Yeah, it makes sense. But at the same time, though, when you buy an index fund, you're basically buying, let's say the S&P 500, you're buying basically essentially a group of 500 some stocks.
Yeah, so
that,
safer.
safer. You're hedging your risk against some of those big movements, because some of these stocks that had 15, 20% down movements in just 1 to 2 days after the earnings announcement, they actually were part of the S&P 500. They are part of the S&P 500. Mm-hmm. So the S&P 500 didn't drop as much. So essentially, I mean, you are really hedging your risk by diversifying that risk all the way across 500 some stocks.
Yeah. So what's the argument or counter argument for example, being like, okay, so for someone who's just new to the stock market or investing that comes in and says, okay, well, obviously I'm just going to buy Google and Amazon because they're just obviously going to do really well over the next like 5-10 years. Is there, what counter arguments is there to that? Is it because it's an expensive entry point, or?
Yeah, so the price of the stock itself doesn't matter. You know, you can have a stock that's trading at $5 and it could be very expensive, and you can have a stock that's trading at $1,500 and it could be inexpensive. But part of it is that managing that risk. I mean, just for example, if we look at Google and Amazon, you know, now the government claims like, hey, they're so big, there's all this anti-competitive, antitrust issues. We need to kind of control how big they get. And things like that, you know, do have an effect on them short term, and they could have an effect on them long term. So the argument would really be, you know, if you believe in the company, and if you know that this company is going to do well long term, you know, by all means, invest a little bit of money in there. Don't put a huge chunk of your portfolio. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to allocate 10-15% of my overall money towards individual stocks. Yeah, that's okay. But if you say, hey, I'm going to be allocating 80-90% of my money towards individual stocks, that might be too risky, because you just don't know when they do have those downturns, are they going to be like that for 6 months, a year, or are they going to be in that downturn for a number of years? And that's kind of where it's hard. I mean, I'll give you an example of Microsoft. Yeah. You know, for the longest time, it felt like the stock was just doing nothing. Yeah. And then just within the last few years, it's more than doubled. So people that bought that stock for the long haul, a lot of people probably ended up selling that stock thinking, well, this isn't doing anything. Yeah. Now it's actually, you know, one of the best stocks out there, at least for the time being. Yeah. So with Google, you know, again, the counter argument is, you know, Google has a huge market for the ad space, but now the government steps in, says, hey, this is not cool. It's becoming a monopoly. We've got to tame you down a little bit. Yeah. So now the stock starts to have a decline because of that. So it's really hard to. Within individual stocks, it's really hard to time the market on them. Yeah. And I think, is there a sense that a lot of the growth has already happened, so you're buying into it, like you're late in the game to get into that? Yeah. So that's another thing is, you know, depending on who you talk to, some people would say, you know, Google's already had a lot of that growth as a large cap company, whereas some people say, well, Google's so undervalued right now because they're just scratching the online ad space, even though, like, I mean, the online ad space has grown ridiculously big. I mean, we look at all these messages we get nowadays that, hey, I'm a digital marketer, and and LinkedIn. Yeah. So, but no, truly the online space has grown so much, yet some people believe that it is just getting started. So it'll be interesting to see how that really plays out over the next few years. Yeah. And how about the other things? So for example, like the cryptocurrency side of things, that's obviously a lot of people don't know too much about, or a little bit maybe intimidated by it, like the blockchain technology and stuff. Like, you feel like you don't fully understand what it is or how it works. Have you started like dabbling in that at all? Yeah. So for disclosure purposes, I mean, I did buy some Bitcoin and I sold it, you know, basically I think I bought it back in December and I ended up selling it like literally a day after April Fool's. Yeah. Because no one could figure out like what caused Bitcoin to go from, you know, where it was back in December to April, up 25%, just like that. No reason behind it, no news. Yeah. So I was like, you know what, I think I'm just going to sell this. This doesn't make sense. And of course, like by now it's gone up like another 70% since then. So for me, I think blockchain does make a lot of sense. But what we don't understand, what we don't know is cryptocurrency, is Bitcoin the one that's going to emerge out of this, or what is it going to be? Yeah. So you don't really hear a lot about some of those other currencies that were being discussed back then, like Litecoin and Ethereum and Ripple and I don't know, some of the other ones, but Bitcoin still has obviously a lot of that market share when it comes to crypto. But, companies like JP Morgan and Facebook, they've brought up crypto before, and they said they want to have some kind of platform that can be used. So I think it is in our future. We just don't know how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
IBM is a big player in blockchain, and they believe in all that transparency. But how that's going to work with the currency portion of that is yet to be determined, I feel like.
Yeah. Has there been any incorporation into like day-to-day life with cryptocurrency? Like, do people use it for a daily transactional basis at this point, or?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I haven't come across, any patient saying like, "Hey, do you accept crypto?" But I think there are a few dental offices
I've
out
seen
there.
It, yeah, I don't know if it's like a meme or if it's like an actual thing, but
yeah, they have a little sticker, crypto,
yeah,
Bitcoin accepted here kind of thing, and I've seen some pictures, like random pictures of just places out there in some of the bigger cities, like New York, San Fran.
Yeah.
Where businesses will put up those signs that they accept crypto. So I'm not sure if anyone's actually using it.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'll tell you what though, since I'm in Ohio, one of the reasons I bought Bitcoin was because literally 2 or 3 days before I bought Bitcoin, the Ohio, I think it was Secretary of State, that said that you can pay your taxes, the Ohio taxes,
really?
Your real estate taxes with Bitcoin.
Nice.
So it was kind of strange.
Yeah.
And I actually thought that it was a pretty bold move for them to actually say to start accepting it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it took off at all. I feel like, so I kind of started following the news pretty closely. Are other states going to start accepting Bitcoin? But that wasn't the case. So I was kind of disappointed when that happened.
Yeah.
So we'll see if the government gets into it and if they start to maybe accept Bitcoin.
And wasn't there meant to be a Bitcoin ETF that was supposed to hit the market sometime this year? That was supposed to be like a pretty big deal. Like, what happened to that?
So I'm not sure what happened to that, because I actually had a patient from Fidelity that talked about it too, and Fidelity was supposed to get into it, and I think they still are, but things have been a little bit slower than they seem they're going to go. So
yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's always fun. I think it's one of those things where with investments, like no one truly knows. Like even if the top experts, like they can have a more educated guess at what's going to happen, but
yeah.
it's anyone's.
I think I've literally seen targets from $0 all the way up to what, $500,000, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of insane.
So just
and that just goes to show you. I mean, think about this though. From an investment standpoint, you invest in things that you believe can provide you a good return on your money.
Yeah.
With riskier investments like this, when we don't know how that's going to play out, I mean, that's a lot of risk to take.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of risk to say, hey, I'm going to put in, $50,000 in Bitcoin, and I have no idea if it's going to go to zero or if it's going to go to 500,000. Of course, if it goes to $500,000,
yeah,
that person's going to look like the smartest person on earth.
Yeah.
But that's a big risk to take. And that's why I think diversifying your investments is such a key thing. You're not just diversifying it in the stock market, in different funds, in different categories, but you can diversify in other categories in investments, such as real estate is a big one. That's a hard asset that you can measure. You can basically say, okay, I bought some rental properties. I've looked into, this is what the cash flow comes out of it each month. So you can measure that kind of performance, right? Yeah. But with Bitcoin, I mean, you're just relying on what the market dictates on what its value is. And a lot of it is on speculation. To me, it doesn't make sense to put a big portion of your money. Yeah, maybe if someone says like, hey, I'm willing to take this risk, I might put in 2 or 3% of my money in Bitcoin.
Yeah,
great. But don't put a big chunk of that and then regret that you lost it all.
Yeah, a friend of mine is like, I'll never be able to live with myself if it goes up to like $100,000. So he's like, I'll have some money in there. If I lose it, I lose it.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to put money in there that that if you lost it all, you won't be upset about.
Yeah, it won't affect your lifestyle or your savings too much. So how about real estate? Because I know it's interesting because as an outsider looking into the US, because you see like there's like 25-year-olds that own like 10 houses. Because the housing, I mean, because the US is obviously such a wide and big country with so many different little pockets and different price points. And so if you're living in like New York, like a 25-year-old is not going to have 10 properties just because of the property prices. But I guess if you're like in the middle of the country where there's maybe not as much demand or prices are a bit more affordable, like you can buy a house for like $70,000 or something, it seems like, which is not realistic in Australia, definitely, and in Canada, in the big cities. Yeah. So apart from like buying your own primary residence, what's your thoughts on like residential investments for like young people. I feel like it's a little bit more of a barrier to entry because in the stock market, like you said, you can have $20 and buy 4 stocks of something. But maybe with residential, you put 10% down, 20% down. It's a little bit harder to kind of enter that space. So what's your thoughts around the residential investments?
Yeah, so I think again that part of investment kind of comes in maybe a little bit later on, once you've kind of established a base, once you've established the foundation on your savings. That includes having an emergency fund. And when I talk about savings and investing, I actually want to tie in a little bit about insurance in there as well, because I think a lot of us don't think about insurance as an investment in ourselves, just because, if something happens to us, what are we really saving for? We're saving for our future. We're saving for our family.
Yeah.
So if something happens to us, are we going to be able to provide that kind of lifestyle to our family members? And having a good disability insurance policy is such a key thing for dentists.
Yeah.
Because things happen, and you really have to make sure that you can still earn some kind of income if you're sick or if you're not able to practice dentistry. So besides having that foundation of making sure you have a savings account, making sure you have your emergency savings built up, your retirement plan have started, and then comes the real estate. Some people don't believe in the stock market at all, which is okay. But I think some of that should come on a little bit later on. But yeah, I feel like real estate is an amazing tool to grow your wealth. And again, part of that is, as long as you can diversify the type of investments that you have out there, real estate makes a lot of sense. I personally invest in real estate. I have 3 rental properties in Columbus, and they've done really well. The market has appreciated, so that's worked out well, and the cash flow on those is really good per month. Yeah. But on the other hand, I have seen some of the prices that have just gone up and makes no sense. The cap rates have come down. So you're like, does this really make sense to buy this property now? And it doesn't. I actually just looked at some yesterday. Yeah. The cash flow kind of made sense. So I'm doing a little bit more research on that, but I've been looking for the last 18 months, and I haven't really found anyone that has made a lot of sense from the numbers standpoint. So the real estate prices have gone up. And again, I think, like you just said, real estate market is so local that you can have properties that are so overvalued right now and absolutely makes no sense to buy, but they're still getting sold. And there are properties that are so undervalued, and they sometimes sit there. No one wants to buy them because of the location, So, and I think part of the issue is also, when you think about real estate, it's not just buying an overvalued or undervalued property, but it's the cash flow that comes out of it, right? So if you have a property that you think is undervalued, but you can't rent it out, you can't lease it out, does it really make sense to buy it? The cash flow is what determines if it's going to be undervalued or overvalued at that point.
Henry Schein 360 is a loyalty program like no other. Not only is it free to join, you can also enjoy thousands of dollars of savings year after year. On average, a 2-chair practice can save a minimum of $15,000 a year by taking advantage of a cash rebate every month, product discount, and generous savings from our program partners. If you aren't a member yet and you're looking to join, either contact your Henry Schein territory manager or send an email to shine360@henryschein.com.au. That's shine360@henryschein.com.au. Don't spend thousands of dollars every year on similar programs. Join Henry Schein 360 and watch your practice grow.
So
yeah, that's interesting because I'm obviously in Melbourne. It's a pretty expensive city, obviously, to live in with the prices and the rent. Rent is quite high, but we have a thing. It's pretty rare here to, for example, put down like 20% even to buy an apartment or a condo or a townhouse and have it be like cash flow positive, to the point that people do it. They buy these investments because they have a thing called like negative gearing. So the difference between the mortgage payment that you owe on the property and the amount that you rent the property out for, that's tax deductible as like a loss. So it's pretty interesting when you hear the way the pricing works in the US, where you might even be able to afford with the 20% that I would put down to buy an apartment here, you can buy a house outright. Yeah. So there's not even a mortgage on there. So you can just have obviously positive cash flow from the start. So it's interesting that exists in some parts of the world, or even some states in the US and not others. So to summarize a few of these points. So you're saying, you're coming out of school, you're making some decent money now. The smartest way is to kind of diversify your like diversify into investments, into paying off your loan a little bit, personal savings and insurance, and not to really just go really heavy into any of these one categories. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the take home message really is to diversify your money as much as possible, because if you start focusing on one thing, then you really start to lose your focus on other things. And nowadays, just because the way our environment is with so much debt and still trying to focus on, having a family, having investments, having savings, you kind of don't want to just focus on one thing and not be able to get to the other ones in a timely manner. So really the take home message is to make sure you at least sit down, whether it's sitting down by yourself, sitting down with your spouse, sitting down with your financial advisor, kind of figuring out what the game plan is. And you basically draw up that plan. Maybe it's 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. What am I really trying to achieve over the next few years or so? And then you basically have goals. You say, okay, my goal is to pay off this debt in the next 15, 20 years. So you basically come up with those payment plans that's going to work for you. Same thing with retirement. If your goal is that you want to have $500,000 in savings in the next 10 years or so, what do you have to do to get to that number? And you start doing projections. At the end of the day, it's just projections. Doesn't mean that it's going to get there. You might blow past through those, or you might not get there at all. But at least you have a game plan in mind. And then again, working with someone that's actually going to help you get there. There are a lot of people that are kind of do-it-yourself type of people. They do really well. And there are people that just want the help. They just need the help. It doesn't mean that they don't know. It just means that they can probably focus their time more on doing the dentistry. Because we just talked about this earlier, that the ROI that you get from dentistry is so much greater than the ROI that you get from investing in some kind of stock or investing in some kind of index fund and whatnot. So again, part of the issue with investing in yourself is that it's your two hands that's doing the dentistry. So you have to kind of rely on yourself. And that's why diversifying that portion of that makes a lot of sense too, because, if something happens to you, are your investments going to be able to provide you enough passive income to live off of? So there's just no one thing that makes sense. I think it's a little bit of everything that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And how soon would you, so one thing I've always heard in these like business podcasts and stuff that you hear with dentistry focus is a lot of people say, buy your practice before you buy your house. What do you think about that sentiment?
Yeah. So I think I think the answer is it depends. Depending on what your personal feelings are. Some people say, look, I really want to live in this particular city. Yeah. If that's what their goal is, then they're probably going to have to basically possibly compromise on what kind of practice they get. Yeah, maybe they get lucky, they get a great practice, and then they buy a house. But it really just depends on what their goals are. If they have found a nice house, it does sometimes kind of prevents them from moving then, possibly. They might say, well, I already bought a house here, I've got to try to buy a practice here. So yeah, and in essence, I do agree that it makes a lot more sense to figure out where you're going to be practicing. You purchase a practice and then you work your way of buying a house. For me, personally, I think what we ended up doing was once I found this practice in Cincinnati, we just asked a little bit more time with the seller so we could find a house and buy our house first, because especially with most banks, I think it's 2 years or so that they want you to have a consistent cash flow to give you a loan. And I didn't want to take that kind of risk. I was like, okay, I've got the savings, 20% down. I want to just use that to buy the house now and not have to live in an apartment or so. So for us, like we just worked with the seller, asked for a little bit extra time while the closing of the house was going through, and it worked out really good. So in essence, I do agree that you should find where you're going to be working, as long as it's a reasonable area where you can find happiness, be content with with the type of practice you want to run. So it's more so of a practicality type thing. It's not really like a financial difference maker, whether you buy a house first or buy the practice first. I think it truly depends on one situation. I'll tell you this though. I have some friends that have bought practices in small towns and they've done really well financially. And then they've chosen to maybe live in a bigger city. Maybe it's 45 minutes, an hour outside of their practice, and they're completely content with that. Whereas there are people that say, hey, look, I want to practice. I don't want to live an hour away from a practice. I'm going to buy a house maybe 10 minutes down the road. And they end up doing that. So it really just depends. At the end of the day, you should really kind of figure out, where do you see yourself living? Where do you see yourself practicing? And if all of that makes sense, then you just go for it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the dental investment group on Facebook. Obviously, it's really active. It's such a great resource. I enjoy going on there and kind of seeing the comments and kind of learning a few things. If anything, people list a stock and you like look it up and you're interested in like, oh, what's going on? Why are they kind of recommending it? And I think it's like last time I checked, it was over like 10,000 members, which is a nice little community there. So tell me a little bit about that, like how it started and what are your plans for it for the future?
Yeah, so it was actually really fun starting that. It was about 2 years ago. I just remember a lot of people were asking me questions on retirement planning, investments, and savings, all that kind of stuff. Once they got into dentistry, once they started to have that incomes where they were saving more than they thought. So I said, well, let's just start some kind of small group that can allow us to talk about this stuff, collaborate with each other. And it was just people adding their friends and them adding their friends, and it just slowly grew to 10,000 members. It's been a lot of fun. I've actually, I feel like I learned something every day from that group. There are a lot of smart people on there. A lot of people are asking questions about their personal situations. They're asking things that can make their lives better. So it's been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed interacting and gotten to meet some people that are super smart and just really, help you and guide you. And so it's been real nice.
Perfect. And what do you plan for the future?
Yeah, so no major plans right now. I mean, I do it for fun. We've started to host some webinars on that. That's been nice. The goal is to really work on trying to basically keep making the group better as much as possible, keep working with dentists that need help. So it's been pretty rewarding to know that you're able to help other people achieve their dreams. I'll get messages every single day, what should I do for this situation, that situation. I worked with dentists one-on-one to just really kind of figure out their plan, tailor their plan to their situation and really come up with a solution for them that works, and practical solutions. I'm kind of like one of those like short and sweet to the point. I don't want to BS. I don't want to just, waste their time, my time. Just tell them like, this is what I think. This is what you can do. And it's not just financials in terms of like investments. I mean, it's really kind of tailoring their personal situations from practice, whether they're an associate, whether they're an owner, maybe they're looking to buy a practice, maybe they're looking to start a retirement plan. So it's kind of like doing this coaching with them one-on-one, but really just focusing on their personal situation. Because there's really no one size fits all. I mean, there's generalizations, but at the end of the day, everyone's life is so different, and they really just need guidance and plan. And it's not something, most people I believe in that once you teach them the basics, the foundation, they can do a lot of this stuff on their own. And that's what I like to focus on, is that, most people don't need some kind of hand-holding all their lives. They just want a good plan that they can follow, kind of recharge and re-energize a few years later. So it's been fun talking to so many people and really gotten to know some of these folks.
That's great. I think it's a great service. And I think it's something that is really valuable because, unlike yourself who did a business undergrad, a lot of us have like not much background in that, right? And then we come into the workforce and we're making some money and we're like, okay, what now? Like, what do I do with it? How do I save it properly? How do I plan for my future? So what's your kind of, I guess for yourself, like your long-term career plans? Like, do you hope to retire at a certain age? Or like, what's your
I'm a numbers guy. So I like to be able to see, okay, what I'm doing right now, what could I be doing in 5 years, 10 years? So my personal plan, I mean, I like dentistry. I like being able to help patients and just enjoying the process. So for me, I feel like, I'll continue to do that for a while. From the number standpoint, I'm like thinking, okay, I could probably be done with that at some point in my 40s. Should I leave dentistry or do I? And I don't know the answer. I mean, I think a lot of it just is going to depend on, what things are at that point in time and kind of go from there. But I really do enjoy, both aspects. I mean, I love working with dentists kind of one-on-one, but at the same time, I love the aspect of doing clinical dentistry, serving patients, being able to do some complicated procedures. So it's a lot of fun being able to do both.
And are you like a one super practice type of guy or a multi-practice owner? Like what's more in your future, do you think?
Yeah, so just one right now. And I'll tell you this, I remember I was graduating dental school and I said, I want to buy a practice within a year of graduating dental school, and I'm going to own multiple practices, all that kind of stuff. And then I realized that, while some of that is true, there are folks that own multiple practices. They make a great living, but it comes with a lot of stress also. For me, what I found was, if I could supercharge my practice in just one practice and really take it, maximize its ability to produce as much as possible, maximize its ability to really serve as many patients as possible.
Yeah.
That would be more rewarding for me than to dabble in multiple practices. And on the other hand, I know folks that own multiple practices and they're like, God, I just want to get out of this.
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm into it. So for us, it's just been that one practice, and I've been able to supercharge it. I've been able to do well with it. So for now, just going to continue to do that. And we'll see where the future is. Sometimes opportunities come along.
Yeah.
And might say, yeah, this makes sense to go after that second one.
That's awesome. I think it's great. I think it's important to have those goals in place and have those numbers down as well. And like you said earlier, I think, having financial goals, like any other goals, is important to have something to like actually work towards. Because if every month you get your paycheck, you're like, okay, I guess I'll put this much aside, and there's no like bigger picture in mind, then it's hard to kind of actually like have anything to kind of aim for and make sure you're kind of staying on track with it as well.
Yeah. So no, I definitely believe in having a lean practice, that the overhead is controlled. You're making good money, serving a lot of patients. I feel like I know a lot of patients or people that have bought multiple practices, and they're just like, God, I can't handle this. I want to get out of this. Work on one practice that can really provide you the maximum ROI and go from there.
That's great. So I like to normally wrap these things up with a bit of a rapid fire. So let's get into that. What's your favorite pizza topping?
My favorite
pizza topping.
Pizza.
Yeah.
I like cheese.
Cheese. And what's your favorite tooth to work on?
Oh, number 19.
And what's one procedure that makes you question your career choice in dentistry?
Sometimes working on that 2 and 15.
Yeah.
With that big muscle, you're trying to pull on it. You're trying to work on the distal aspect of that. You're like, oh God, how do I get through this part today? Yeah.
And if you weren't in dentistry, what career would you be in?
I think that's probably an easy one. I think I would do something in the financial world, probably some kind of investment banking or advising, CPA kind of thing.
What's your favorite band or artist?
Oh, that's a tough one. I like Coldplay a lot. Listen to a lot of music, so that's good.
Great. Awesome, Sunny. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I know it's a pretty broad topic, so it's kind of hard to dive into a lot of things in a lot of detail in like a space of an hour. But what I was hoping to get out of this was like a little bit of a framework of like how you begin to even conceptualize these things. I like how you broke it down. So what I kind of took away from this was try to diversify your money, one, and your investments, like, second. So make sure you put a little bit into each thing that you're kind of working towards, be it saving for a house, be it, be your own financial, like emergency funds, investments, student loans, and kind of make sure that you're kind of putting a little bit into each of those things. So you kind of take everything in with you at once. It's hard to kind of put everything in one basket and then in 20 years, be like, oh, I haven't paid off anything, or I haven't put any investments to the side for my retirement. So I think that's a lot of great value and a lot of great content. And also with the dental investment group, I'll obviously put a link in the show notes for people who might be interested in it, because there's it's a great community on there. And there's always I like that it's active. So you put a question, you get a good feedback, a wide range of different types of mentalities as well.
It gets heated sometimes.
Yeah. So it's not like everyone's like, oh yeah, just go for it. Some people, if it's not smart, or in their opinion, it's not smart, they'll let you know about it for sure.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.